Late November in the suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota, where a crisp chill hangs in the air. Along Summit Avenue, the Victorian mansions stood with quiet dignity as fallen leaves danced in the wind. Among them was the Carters' imposing two-story home. A brand-new Lexus RX sat in the driveway. Elizabeth Morgan stepped out of the car, phone in hand, and called out excitedly, "Mom, I just landed a $1.5 million property from a new client." "Oh, that's wonderful." Patricia Carter welcomed her daughter at the entrance, arms outstretched. Her careful makeup and cashmere sweater from Nordstrom added an air of elegance to her bearing. Meanwhile, that afternoon at the Regions Hospital Care Facility, Jennifer Wilson was meticulously updating her elderly care records. She'd been the nurse in charge of her parents' medical care for over a decade. Though reserved by nature, her reliable skills and dedication had earned her high respect within the facility. "Thank you for your thorough work as always," Wilson, a senior nurse, called out. She smiled in response, "Thank you. That's the end of my shift for today." Back at her apartment near Como Park, her 10-year-old daughter Lily had finished her homework and was waiting. "Mom, look. I tried a new cookie recipe I saw on YouTube." The kitchen counter displayed slightly misshapen but lovingly made chocolate chip cookies. Since losing her father in a car accident 2 years ago, Lily had been trying her best to stay cheerful. She'd been honing her cooking skills by watching cooking shows and helping with simple chores at her grandparents' house. Her pure kindness warmed the hearts of those around her. They looked delicious. Jennifer embraced her daughter. Her annual salary of $65,000 wasn't considered wealthy in this area, but the time spent with her daughter was priceless. Meanwhile, in the Carters' living room, Elizabeth was bragging about her son Tommy's grades. "My boy got another perfect score in math." The 12-year-old nephew was deeply engrossed in his latest iPad, sunk into the sofa. That day too, Robert Carter sat silently reading his newspaper. The former high school teacher had recently begun rereading the same articles multiple times. Everyone noticed the early signs of mild dementia but chose not to mention it. Despite needing hospital visits 3 times a week for diabetes and high blood pressure, Patricia was desperate to maintain appearances with the neighbors. "Elizabeth, let's make this Thanksgiving extra special. I've ordered a butterball turkey." Though the Carters appeared affluent on the surface, they were actually deeply in debt due to rising medical and living costs. Jennifer sensed this reality, but the gulf between the sisters had grown too wide for anyone to bridge. At dusk, Lily showed a handmade card she created at her grandparents' house. "I'm going to give this to Grandma at Thanksgiving." Simple drawings and words conveyed pure love. On Thanksgiving Day, Jennifer's car slowly pulled up in front of the Carter mansion. In the passenger seat, Lily carefully cradled a homemade pumpkin pie. "Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa will like it?" Lily's voice mixed with hope and anxiety. "Of course they will. You put so much love into making it," Jennifer encouraged her daughter while gazing at the row of luxury cars parked out front. The scene unavoidably highlighted the difference between the sisters' worlds. As they got out of the car, a cold north wind brushed their cheeks. Lily took out the card to accompany her pie. She had worked hard on the pumpkin pie since the previous day, following a Betty Crocker recipe book. She'd carefully measured the spices, checking YouTube tutorials multiple times. The card read, "To my beloved Grandma and Grandpa," in careful handwriting. When they rang the doorbell, a maid greeted them. "Please come in." Her manner was polite but somehow cold. The moment Jennifer stepped into the living room, she felt something was off. Williams-Sonoma tablecloths and Pottery Barn fine china were arranged perfectly on the table. The space was decorated with Martha Stewart-style elegance, looking like it came straight from an interior design magazine. At the center sat an expensive butterball turkey. Green bean casserole, sweet potato casserole, elaborate cranberry sauce, and bottles of fine wine were arranged around it. However, the table was only set for 8 people. "Grandma!" Lily tried to run over innocently. That's when Patricia gave her a cold look. "Jennifer, we have special guests today. Important clients from Elizabeth's real estate business." Her voice lacked the warmth of the mother she once knew. Lily stood holding her homemade pie, anxiously looking at the table. "Grandma, where are our seats?" The air froze in that moment. Patricia looked down at Lily from her height and coldly declared, "These seats are for family." Elizabeth added with a smirk, "It wouldn't be appropriate for poor people from a single-parent household. Having people like you at dinner would be disrespectful to our clients." The relatives gathered in the living room all averted their eyes. No one dared to challenge these cruel words. In front of 12-year-old Tommy sat what appeared to be a specially prepared children's dinner set. Turkey, gratin, and dessert, all perfectly plated. Seeing this, large tears began to fall from Lily's eyes. "Mom." Her voice trembled. Jennifer quietly took her daughter's hand. "Let's go, Lily." Her voice was surprisingly calm. The homemade pumpkin pie was left on the side table, still warm and fragrant with Lily's dedication. No one tried to stop them from leaving. The sound of the heavy door closing echoed quietly. Outside, the sun was already starting to set. Once in the car, Jennifer held Lily tightly. "I'm sorry, Lily. This is Mommy's fault." "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Lily's question made Jennifer's heart ache. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. You're a wonderful daughter." The ginkgo trees along Summit Avenue glowed like fire in the setting sun. As the Honda CR-V slowly pulled away, the image of her childhood home in the rearview mirror felt somehow like a stranger's house. The car was quiet. Soft Christmas songs playing on the radio hinted at the cold season ahead. Lily remained silent, staring out the window. Her small profile showed the sadness of a child forced to grow up too soon. By the time they reached their apartment near Como Park, it was already getting dark. While riding the elevator, Jennifer had made up her mind. This would be the moment to end years of patient endurance. Entering the apartment, Lily walked straight to the kitchen in silence. "Mom, can I make cookies?" Her voice showed a brave attempt to distract from her sadness. "Yes, of course. Let's make them together." That night, mother and daughter stood in the kitchen until late. Opening the Betty Crocker recipe book, they tried new cookie recipes together. Their small apartment kitchen was filled with the warmth of the oven and the sweet scent of vanilla. Though not luxurious, it was genuine family time wrapped in real love. A week after Thanksgiving, as Minnesota's winter was about to begin in earnest, Jennifer stared at the missed calls from her mother while walking through the halls of Regions Hospital. Over 10 missed calls. But her finger wouldn't touch the call button. Ms. Wilson, Mrs. Carter's blood sugar levels are at dangerous levels. A colleague handed her an emergency chart. The doctor's report showed that appointments and medication had been neglected. I'm concerned about your mother's condition. She's been canceling appointments since last week, the doctor frowned as he explained. Her diabetes numbers are very unstable. There's a risk she could need emergency transport this weekend. Hearing these words, Jennifer sighed deeply. All along, it had been her who accompanied her parents to hospital visits and managed their medications. Elizabeth was uncooperative, citing work, and was actually receiving financial support from their parents. Returning to her apartment near Como Park, Lily was practicing cooking in the kitchen. Mom, look. I found a new Christmas cookies recipe. Her voice was cheerful, but there was a hint of loneliness. After all, she'd suddenly lost her time learning cooking at her grandparents' house. The phone rang. This time it was from her father. Jenny. Her father's voice sounded weaker than usual. Lately, I am having trouble remembering the names of my medications. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. Through her work at the care facility, she was well acquainted with the progression of dementia. Her father's symptoms were clearly showing signs of worsening. The next day, she ran into Elizabeth at the church community center. Looks tough, Elizabeth said mockingly, clutching her expensive designer bag. But you're the one who abandoned our parents. Abandoned? Jennifer's voice shook. Who do you think has been managing their medical care for the past 10 years? Well, that's your job, isn't it? You're a nurse, Elizabeth shrugged. I have my own life. As a luxury real estate agent, I have to maintain certain appearances. Those words filled Jennifer with intense anger. But even more than that, a deep sadness welled up inside her. The gulf between the sisters had become too wide to bridge. A week later, Patricia was rushed to the emergency room. Her blood sugar levels have risen to dangerous levels, the emergency room doctor explained. Who has been managing her medications until now? My sister. Elizabeth started to say, then swallowed her words. At that moment, in a corner of the hospital room, Robert was repeatedly asking the same question. Patty, what day is it? Patty, what day is it? His dementia symptoms had suddenly worsened with the stress. The next day, there was a meeting with a social worker. Home care is no longer feasible in this situation, the social worker explained quietly. 24-hour professional care will be necessary. But such expenses. Elizabeth's voice rose. Insurance coverage is limited, the social worker continued. The family will need to share the costs. At these words, Elizabeth's expression clouded. Her glamorous life as a luxury real estate agent was actually built on debt. Car loans for expensive vehicles, payments for branded goods, her son's private school tuition. The costs of maintaining appearances had strained their finances. A few days later, the Carters' reputation began to rapidly decline in the church community. Rumors spread quickly. Whispers of the Carters' downfall began to circulate in the upscale Summit Avenue neighborhood. Meanwhile, Lily tried new recipes every day. Mom, these cookies for Grandpa. She started to say, then stopped herself. Her small hands kneaded the dough a little harder. One day, Jennifer ran into her mother in the hospital hallway. Jenny. Patricia's voice had lost its former dignity. I wanted to see you. That day, Patricia struggled with her words. I was wrong. In that moment, something hot welled up in Jennifer's chest. But this wasn't a wound that could be easily healed. The pain of seeing Lily's tears was still too fresh. Mom, let's talk about Dad's care. Jennifer regained her professional composure as a nurse. But first, there's something I need you to understand. Outside, a cold wind had begun to blow, announcing the arrival of Minnesota's harsh winter. But it was also the beginning of a season of change for this family. Looking at the snowy landscape of Como Park, Jennifer quietly strengthened her resolve. Not to give in to hatred or anger, but to do what she could now to protect those she loved. That night, Lily baked cookies with a special recipe. Mom, I added the vanilla scent that Grandma likes. Jennifer hugged her daughter. Sometimes, pure kindness has the power to heal the deepest wounds. No one knew what the long winter ahead would bring to this family. There was only one thing certain. That love sometimes heals us in the most unexpected ways. The scent of vanilla wafting through the kitchen quietly spoke this truth. Christmas Eve morning, heavy snow began falling in St. Paul. The weather forecast warned of the most severe cold wave in a decade. Around 10 a.m., as the bells of the Cathedral of St. Paul rang, Jennifer's phone rang. Your father left the house. Patricia's distressed voice rang out. He said he was going to buy Lily's cookies. What? In this weather? Jennifer's spine froze. When did he leave? About 30 minutes ago. I dozed off. Patricia's voice trembled. Then Elizabeth called too. I've reported it to the police. But they say searching will be difficult in this weather. At their apartment near Como Park, Lily looked anxiously at Jennifer. Mom, Grandpa, for me. Don't worry, Lily, Jennifer embraced her daughter while quickly putting on her coat. Can you stay with Mrs. Johnson next door for a little while? The Honda CR-V slowly started moving through the blizzard. Visibility was extremely poor, with snow constantly accumulating on the windshield. The sound of wipers desperately clearing snow heightened the tension inside the car. Arriving at Summit Avenue, Patricia was sobbing at the entrance. Elizabeth, wrapped in an expensive coat, was irritably talking on her smartphone with the police. Target. Dad's been saying lately that he often goes to Target, Elizabeth said, hanging up her phone. No, Jennifer quietly answered. Dad goes to the old bakery Lily loves. She's been studying how to make their cookies. The three began searching in the blizzard. Elizabeth's Lexus got stuck on an unplowed road. There's no way that old bakery would be open in this weather. She couldn't hide her irritation. Meanwhile, Jennifer recalled her father's habits. As a former teacher, he always walked the same route through town. She mapped out the shortest route to the old bakery in her mind. Then, a call came from Regent's Hospital. An unidentified elderly man has been brought in by ambulance. Suspected hypothermia. Rushing to the hospital, the emergency room was filled with busy activity. Medical staff hurried back and forth, monitor warning sounds rang out. In the treatment room, Robert lay pale on the bed. In his hands, he clutched a frozen box of cookies. His body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels, and his consciousness was hazy. Lily, cookies. Father repeated in a hoarse voice. In that moment, all the family's accumulated distortions were suddenly exposed. The emergency doctor confronted them with harsh reality. Continuing home care is dangerous. He needs professional 24-hour care. Elizabeth's expression clouded. But such expenses. My savings. Patricia started to say, then faltered. In fact, her savings were nearly depleted from supporting Elizabeth's family. Jennifer analyzed the situation calmly. Her experience as a nurse was needed now more than ever. Dad's symptoms and Mom's chronic conditions. We can't handle this with just family anymore. You don't understand anything. Elizabeth raised her voice. You betrayed the family. Even at Thanksgiving. Betrayed? Jennifer's voice shook. For the past 10 years, who do you think has been managing their medical expenses, accompanying them to hospital visits, and managing their medications? That's... Elizabeth's voice trailed off. At that moment, the hospital room door opened. Lily entered, holding a box of homemade cookies. Mrs. Johnson next door had brought her, knowing about the emergency. Grandpa, I made these. I studied the recipe, trying to match the taste of the cookies from that old bakery you liked. At those words, the atmosphere in the room changed. Lily gently took her grandfather's hand and offered the cookies. The scent of vanilla quietly filled the room. Robert's consciousness slowly began to return. Lily, thank you. His voice was weak but filled with genuine affection. Patricia was quietly crying. What foolish things we've done. Elizabeth too began crying, not caring that her expensive makeup was running. We lost sight of what's important because of vanity and pride. Jennifer silently watched her family. Sometimes, the deepest crisis teaches us the most important truths. Outside, the snow continued to fall heavily. But inside the room, there was a strange warmth. It was like an invisible light created by pure love. The nurse quietly finished checking vitals and announced, his condition is stabilizing. Though the life-threatening crisis had passed, this was also a new beginning. Lily spoke gently to her grandfather by the bed. Grandpa, next time let's make cookies together. I'll teach you. That night, looking at the snowy landscape of Como Park, Jennifer sighed deeply. The path ahead for the family wouldn't be smooth. But today's events marked the beginning of real change. As the next Thanksgiving approached, Patricia stood by the window in her room at Oak Grove Senior Living, located in a quiet residential area about 15 minutes by car from Summit Avenue. The silhouette of the cathedral rose beyond the autumn-colored trees. Mom, how's your blood sugar today? Jennifer arrived for her twice-weekly nursing visit. It's completely stable now. Patricia's expression was peaceful. She wasn't wearing her luxury brand sweaters or flashy accessories anymore. Instead, a simple white apron signaled preparation for the upcoming cooking class. Lily, what are you teaching us today? Robert called from the living room. His dementia had slowed its progression, and he was spending peaceful days. Today we're making Grandma's recipe. Now 11 years old, Lily skillfully began preparations in the kitchen of her grandparents' room. The Sunday cooking class had become a new family tradition. Lily's passion for cooking, which began with studying the old bakery's cookies, had become a healing force for the entire family. The Betty Crocker recipe book was no longer just a guide but a source of inspiration, as she created her own recipes combining techniques found on YouTube. The doorbell rang, and Elizabeth entered with her son Tommy. Gone were the luxury brand bags, replaced by a homemade apron. "Sorry I'm late," she smiled sheepishly. A real estate contract ran long. Elizabeth's life had changed significantly. She'd shifted her focus from luxury properties to general housing transactions and reformed her show-off lifestyle. She was now properly sharing their parents' care expenses. "Mom, can I help too?" Tommy, now 13, showed interest in cooking for the first time. The nephew who had been absorbed in his iPad was now joining in family time. "Of course." Lily smiled kindly at her cousin. "You can be my assistant chef." Watching the family in the kitchen, Jennifer remembered last Christmas Eve. Ironically, that day's crisis had become the catalyst for rebuilding family bonds. Moving to assisted living hadn't been an easy decision. However, the 24-hour professional care and each family member's shared responsibilities had actually fostered genuine connections. "Hey, remember?" Elizabeth suddenly spoke to her sister. "When we were kids, watching Mom cook like this?" "Yes," Jennifer nodded quietly. "But it's different now. Lily's the one teaching us." At those words, tears glistened in Patricia's eyes. The true happiness that had been invisible when she was caught up in appearances and pride was right here. "Here it is, all done." Lily proudly presented a freshly baked apple pie. Though rough around the edges, the handmade pie with its heartfelt care radiated more warmth than any expensive butterball turkey. "Looks delicious." Tommy showed genuine appreciation. Though there were no expensive dishes or tablecloths, the family's expressions around the table were warmer than ever before. "This is what Thanksgiving should be," Patricia whispered. "Yes, Mom," Jennifer gently replied. "This is real family time." Outside, the cold north wind swirled the autumn leaves. But inside, the room was filled with the warmth of the oven and the sweet scent of cinnamon. On the way back to Como Park, Lily asked, "Mom, did we find happiness?" Jennifer met her daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Yes, we did. In the truest sense. Sometimes love guides us in the most unexpected ways. Perhaps it's not about lavish meals or expensive gifts, but rather the truth that an 11-year-old girl's pure heart can teach us." The Honda CR-V slowly drove through the twilight streets. Next week, and the week after, the family cooking classes would continue. Though not flashy, it was the beginning of a new family story, bound together by genuine love.